here this morning. This is our second installment in our new series, Pack Your Bags. And so some of you, I know, packed your bags, packed your backpacks. You headed back to school last week. I know some of you did that. Some of you are getting ready to next week, I guess, have school still coming up. Some of you are in the process of packing bags and heading out, whatever that may mean for you. I thought about my folks. They traveled up here from Florida, so they had some bags to pack and make their way up here to kind of get out of the storm. Some of you walked in today carrying baggage. That could be the case, right? This sermon isn't for you, but no, I'm just kidding. But maybe what we can do, here's the bargain I'll strike with you if we can. Maybe we'll help you unpack some of that stuff and repack with the stuff you need, right? Okay, so maybe you walked in carrying some stuff that God wants you to get rid of, and maybe we can help you do that a little bit today. So last week we began this series, and we said that the focus of this series is to help us know how to prepare for what's next, right? So we all have something coming next in our lives, whatever that may be, whatever season you're in. But we talked about the fact that we should be and we can be preparing now. That even if we don't really know what that next season is, there's some things we can do right now that will set us up and put us in a good position for whatever that next season may be. Last week, I put a list of possible next things. Do you guys remember that? Those of you that were here, we put a list of possible next things that may be coming up for some of you. I don't know. Some of it was college or graduations or new school, new job, babies. Some people are still waiting for babies to arrive. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are kind of coming next. We talked about some people. The thing they're looking forward to next, or maybe they're not really looking forward to it, but it's coming, is like that empty nest thing. Maybe you are looking forward to it. Maybe you're like, that is going to become a bathroom, like a suite once that room is vacated. I don't know. We've threatened that with Caitlin over the years. So you're going to come back from school one day and you're going to walk in and it's going to be a full bathroom suite. You'll sleep in the bathtub. Apparently that's where your room will be. But maybe retirement is next. Maybe that's one of the things you're like, hey, we've already kind of passed through these other phases. Retirement is kind of coming up, or it may be coming next. I kind of asked permission, didn't I? I did, right? Yeah, I'm looking at Terry. The next day, I received a text message from Terry, and this is what it said. I actually have it up here. So Terry said, just wanted you to know, after looking at your list in yesterday's sermon, the only thing left for Steve and me is death. So we have done everything else on the list. I thought that was the best text message. That's the best post-sermon text message I've ever received. It was I take that back. I've heard people say, well, I trusted Jesus. That's better than that. But that's still pretty amazing. But here's the thing, and not to turn the mood really sour or not to suck the air out of the room. There's some things that we listed last week that may be coming up next for you. That might happen or it might not. Death is 1-to-1 ratio. There is 100% participation in death. That means we're all going to face it at some point. And I know you're like, wow, we just got negative. We got really, you're bumming us out already. I think you know this, right? We all intellectually know that at some point we're going to face death. And how we prepare now will determine what happens then. And I think sometimes we don't think about that. It's well, I know it's coming. Just because you know doesn't mean you're ready, right? We went over that last week, right? If you don't remember, watch last week's video. That's what we talked about. Just because you know something's coming doesn't mean you're ready for whatever that thing is. Death is coming for all of us. And what we do now to prepare is what will determine where we will spend eternity, right? What we do with Jesus now will determine whether or not we will see him then. Here's the thing. We are all of us are humans, right? If you're not human, raise your hand. Cool, you're good. We're all humans, right? So we're all made in the image of God. Here's the interesting thing about part of that. And maybe you thought about this and maybe you haven't. But part of being made in the image of God is that we carry some of the characteristics of God's personality and character pressed into us. And one of those things is we are all eternal beings. So what does that mean? That means that we will all live forever somewhere, right? But what we do with Jesus now will determine if we'll see him then. And that's important for us to understand. Here's what Jesus said. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. There's no access to God given. There are no passes to heaven handed out based on our own merit. If I can kind of simplify what that means. There's no access to God given. There are no passes to heaven handed out based on my merit, based on your merit, based on your goodness. It's all based on the love and the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness and the sacrifice of Jesus. That's it. There is no other way. I want you to, if you want to live in heaven, then you have to believe and receive Jesus as Savior now. Matter of fact, 2 Corinthians 6:2, it says this. It says, indeed, the right time is now. Today is the day of salvation. So this morning, I want us to kind of transition back. We're talking about transition. So I want us to transition back to our message from last week. And last week we said this. We said that for each of us, that we have something coming next, right? And you may know what that is. You may be going, yep, I know what's coming next. We're looking forward, babies arriving or weddings getting ready to happen or heading back to work. I'm heading back to school, new job, whatever it may be. So whatever that next thing is, some of you may know what it is, but there's some cases, there's some situations where we don't know what's next. We just know there's something. We're just not sure of what it is. And every time there's a next, that requires a transition. That I'm going to have to change from where I'm at to step into whatever that is, whatever next is. And sometimes we think, well, it's not that big of a deal, right? It's not that big of a transition. It's still a transition. It's still a change. I've been trying to wrap my heart and my head around this recently. Like, I don't have 2 teenage daughters anymore, right? I'm like, oh, that's no big deal. She had a birthday. She's 20. That's different. Like, I don't know why that messed me up. Like, I'm not that old. I can't have a 20-year-old kid. It's like, what is going on? But it's true. I am that old. I'm actually much older than that. But it's one of those things where it's a transition. There's things that shift and there's things that change. And the most difficult thing about transition is that next word, change. So everybody that loves change, just raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, but he does. That's cool. Yeah. She's like, yeah, I love change. Like, I don't know what all that means quite yet, but I love, some of us can acclimate to change sometimes a little better than others, but for the most part, we aren't real stellar in the area of change. We tend to like where we're at, and change is difficult. So the thing about that, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is that any change, whether it's good or bad, creates stress, right? And so that's a thing that sometimes we think about. We always think about stress being such a negative thing. Stress is part of what God built into you to figure out how to make a decision to fight or flight, right? It's like He's built these things into us. That's part of our nature. And so stress comes whether the change is good or the change is bad. So in this series, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how to prepare for what's next, right? We're trying to figure out how to pack our bags. And so what I did is I actually packed a bag. We packed a bag here. And I thought, okay, so what are some of the things that we would want to have with us? What are some of the things we would want to take with us if we're traveling? So I put some items in here that I thought, these are necessary things, right? We got headphones, right? So if you're traveling, I don't know about anybody else, this is necessary. Especially if I want to listen to what I want to listen to, not necessarily what everybody else is doing, right? So I'll put the headphones on. Sometimes we have headphones when we're traveling. One of these things, anybody travel with these? I've never used this before, but now I have one, and I think I'm going to use it. I see people using these all the time, so I'm like, okay, maybe it's a neck pillow, maybe that's something that you want to have with you as you travel. How about this? Anybody ever travel with these things? Ever see anybody travel with these? Just forgive me for just a minute, but for me, it's already frightening to step onto a metal projectile with a bunch of strangers around me. Now I'm going to put a blindfold on? I don't even that whole thing doesn't make sense to me. Why? I'm just going to sit here blindfolded and just imagine what's happening as people are touching and sneezing on me and everything else. I don't know. So there's that kind of stuff that's going on. I don't know about anybody else, but Like, here's some stuff that we might want to pack when we're traveling. Got a toothbrush and some mouthwash. I don't know what it is about traveling, but your breath gets stanky, like when you travel. You ever notice that? Like it gets bad. I don't know what else. We've got a few other things in here. Hand sanitizer. I should have had like a gallon of that. Like, I am always putting this stuff in, but they limit what you can put in your carry-ons. Like, so I just put like 17 of these because they're like the right size. I could just keep using it because you guys know there's stuff that you should not be touching. How about anybody ever use this stuff, Airborne? I've never used this, but apparently it helps your immune system or something. I'm gonna try it next time now that I got it. It's pretty awesome. How about these? Anybody ever travel with these things? Let me pull this out real quick. You guys, can you see that? You see these things? It's these bands, and they say they're supposed to help you with like morning sickness and motion sickness. I've never had morning sickness, so I don't know what that is exactly. But motion sickness. Anybody get motion sick when you travel? I do. Yeah. It's happened since I was a kid. I couldn't read. This stuff is like kind of making me drowsy already. Whatever that is. I don't know if there's a chemical in that or what, but. Whatever, but yeah, I used to sit. I couldn't read like books when I traveled. Anybody else like that? Like you can't focus on stuff or read stuff. It gets kind of nauseous. It got worse over the years. I actually couldn't sit in the back seat any longer. Like if I couldn't see the road, it was bad. I'll be honest. Like the worst case of. Well, I can't say the worst case. It's happened a couple times. There's a few times I've been motion sick, but one of the first times it really hit me was the first time we went on a cruise. Years ago, Clark and Scott, they're on vacation, they had a quartet that sang, and there was a lot of us in California that followed their singing and loved their singing, and they decided, hey, let's just get everybody together and let's all get on a big boat, and let's go to Mexico, and we'll sing, and it was really an awesome idea, and so I think we were 18 or something on this cruise, we decided to go, and I'd never been on a cruise in my life, and kind of the night before, the captain of the ship kind of comes on the intercom and says, hey, tomorrow we're going to be in some choppy water. You may want to kind of, make sure you're making preparations for that or whatever it is. And so I'm like, all right, I didn't really think much about it. And so I remember Maggie had some of those bands with her. They're called C bands, I think is one, or the name brand or something. She had some of these bands, and she starts like kind of handing them out to all of us. And I'm like, no, I don't really need that. That's fine. And she's like, well, it's gonna be pretty bad. You've never been on a cruise. I'm like, yeah, but I go to the beach like all the time. Like I've been on the ocean. Like I know how to surf. Like, are you kidding me? Like this is, and so I thought, no, I don't need it. It's no big deal. So the next day we're sitting at breakfast and we're sitting at this table eating. Remember, Greg he doesn't remember because he was really little, but he was there. He doesn't remember that either, but he was there. But we're sitting and we're eating breakfast in this big room, this dining room with these huge windows. And as we're eating, I look up and we're doing this. And I'm like, whoa, and I'm just like, I'm gonna kind of eat. And I thought, I'm all right. I'm not gonna put the band on. I'm not taking the Dramamine stuff. I think I'll be fine. So we're sitting there doing this for a little while. We finish up breakfast, and I don't know about if you've ever experienced this, but I got up from the table and the whole room went poof. And I went, oh! And I'm just like making my way down the hall. And I just got to lay down. Like, I don't know what's happening, but I need to lay down. Everybody else is fine, and I am not fine. I need to just lay down. But that's something that happens to us. That's something that happens to us. That in the middle of transition, in the middle of moving into a new season, sometimes it causes us to actually lose our balance a little bit. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that's strange about motion sickness is once it's set in, it's hard to get on top of it. It's hard to get beyond it. But that happens to us in our lives as we transition into new seasons. It causes us to lose our equilibrium, and we don't have the same stability that we had before. And that's one of those things that, to be honest with you, it can even happen in a good season. I've had that happen to me in a good season. Like we've transitioned from something into something good, and you're still just kind of like, okay, wait a second, I know this is good, but I'm not sure how we're going to adjust or how we're going to manage or how we're going to do that. And some of you may be doing that. You may be stepping into a good season. Maybe it's a new job or a new relationship. But the temptation in good seasons, I'll be honest with you, the temptation in good weather is to drift away from the person you really want to be. I'll be honest, I think one of the most detrimental things to our spiritual walk is good times. And I know that doesn't, you're like, wow, so are you praying we have a bunch of bad times? No, I'm just praying that we just draw near to God no matter what. But I also know human nature that when we're walking through good things, we tend to believe that we got this. Like, I brought myself into this good season. I will maintain the good season. We're going to keep having good seasons. None of that's true, but we believe it. And the tendency is we start to drift from who we really want to be. For some of you, you may be in or transitioning into a very difficult season. Maybe you've lost a job, or you've lost a loved one, or you had a recent diagnosis, and this new season brings some instability to your world. So what do you need? What do you need when you're in the middle of transition? I think it's the same thing that we need when we're encountering motion sickness. I think it's the same thing. There's some similarities here. We need something to focus on. I always hear that. I heard people say that. Like, that's the common advice if you're feeling motion sick. They tell people if you're experiencing motion sickness is pick something stationary out in front of you and focus your attention and fix your eyes on that, because that'll bring some normality to your life. That you just find that stationary object and somehow that brings a little more stability to you. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to make a large assumption and I'm going to kind of see if I'm right. I think that's something similar to what gymnasts do and high divers do. I'm not a gymnast nor a high diver, but I think I'm looking at Liz like, do you find something stationary when you're flipping 17 times in the air? She used to do that, and probably still can, so that's pretty awesome. But yeah, I've heard that that's what they'll do. They'll like find something on the wall that kind of gives them a sense of where they're at on the balance beam, or where they're at in their spin, or where they're at in their turn to determine what's up, to determine what's stable, to determine what's normal. Not only do we need something to focus on in the middle of our transition, we also need something to hold on to, right? Think about this. You ever ride those shuttle buses or those the trains in the airport terminals that take you from one terminal to the next, or maybe on transit trains, right? That when you're on those kinds of things, I'm not a huge germaphobe, but I'll be honest with you, I just don't really like putting my hands where everybody else's hands have been. That's just me. And so you ever do this? You ever play the game of don't touch it? That's what I play when we're on like the large city, like the transit trains. And by that, I mean you find that spot in the floor where you can just kind of sit there, and I don't have to hold a handrail, and I don't have to hold a handle. I just like, I've got it. And then, I don't know about anybody else, my experience is I think the drivers of the trains know this, and they're determined to throw you to the ground. Like, that's their job. Because you're ready, and then they just take off. You're like, okay, I'm not grabbing, and then they stop, and you're all over. And then, lest you like totally embarrass yourself, you finally reach out and you grab that handle. And it's because in the middle of that transition, in the middle of those difficult things, we need to hold on to something. And when our life is a bit out of balance, we need something to hold on to. And that brings us to what I believe is probably the most important thing that we can pack in the middle of transition. And it's this. Anybody know what that is? It's an anchor, right? It's an anchor. Congratulations, we all know what it is. And the function of this, think about this for a second. The function of this item is to actually hold boats steady in good seasons so that they don't drift from where they want to be. Right? We had an opportunity a few weeks back. We were up in Two Rivers in Manitowoc area, and we got to see this huge boat that made its way across the lake, and we were like, what is this? And we're on our bikes, and we're like, we're going to chase this thing down. I don't know where it's going. And it kind of parks, or that's not the right word, docks. It docks. I guess you don't park a boat. Excuse me, I was never in the Navy or any military. But but one of the things that we noticed is that when this, and it was the big ferry boat that comes across from Michigan that brings cars across and people across, and we noticed this is a large boat, and when it got to the dock, it lets down, it was a beautiful day, hardly any breeze, and it lets down this anchor just to make sure that it stays where it needs to stay and it doesn't drift away in good weather and in good seasons. But in seasons of challenge and seasons of storm, this anchor is what holds the boat there and allows it to weather the storm. We need an anchor we can hold on to in transition. And all of us need this, no matter whether you're going through a good season, so you don't drift, or you're going through a difficult season so you don't go overwhelmed. We need an anchor we can hold on to in transition. But one of the things that I thought about, I was thinking about this word picture and I grabbed this anchor. One of the things that I thought about is that, you know what, the effectiveness of an anchor has everything to do with the weight of the anchor. See, this thing isn't going to do a whole lot of good on anything bigger than a tiny little fishing boat. This isn't going to do a whole lot of good. The effectiveness of an anchor is related directly to the weight of that anchor. The idea isn't, can I hold on to this anchor? It becomes a bigger question. Can this anchor hold on to me? We need an anchor that is sturdy enough and strong enough to hold on to us in transition. We think about that a lot, and and the old saying, and a lot of times the advice is, well, in the middle of that storm, you just need to hang on to Jesus. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have that kind of grip. Matter of fact, I'm told often, you need to get a grip. That's probably true. I don't have that kind of grip. I don't have the kind of grip that's going to allow me to hold on with all of my strength in the middle of challenge, in the middle of storm. So I need something weighty enough and sturdy enough to hold on to me in the middle of that. So over the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about what this might look like in all of our lives. And for some of you, again, you may be entering a new season of life that you're excited about, right? So you may be like, hey, things are going good, things are looking up, I'm transitioning into a new exciting season, and that's wonderful. For others of you, you may be walking into or in the middle of a very challenging season, and it's filled with struggle, and it's filled with loss. And so this morning, for all of us, no matter what this new season holds, whether it's good or bad, we know we need something to anchor us. So I want to talk to you for the next few minutes about what it may look like for us to have an anchor that we can hold on to, but even more importantly, what does it look like to have an anchor that's strong enough and sturdy enough to hold on to us in the middle of life's transition? So we're going to look at a passage in the book of Hebrews, and I'll be really honest, it's not a real easy passage to understand. Maybe it is for other people, it's not for me. And so I don't even feel incredibly adequate trying to explain it. But what I hope is that as we move through this passage together, that we can come away with some solid truth that we can kind of pack in our bag for the seasons of life and the transitions of life. So the book of Hebrews, if you didn't know, was written to a primarily Jewish audience, right? Book of Hebrews in the New Testament was written to a primarily Jewish audience who were transitioning from the law to grace. That's a big step, y'all. Like if you live your life following the rules, when somebody says grace, it's like, whoa, where's the rule list? And it's like, yeah, remember we talked about that last week as well. Remember? Jesus said, yeah, there's two, and I'm going to narrow it down to one, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then the night of his crucifixion, the night of his arrest, he tells his followers, he says, hey, you know what I need you to do? I'm going to give you a new command. You mean we're going to get three? No, we're going to narrow it down to one. You need to love one another the way I've loved you. If you forget everything else, that's the thing you need to cling to. But if I grew up under the law, 613 plus, because they added like some extras in there at their own discretion, if I grew up under that, transitioning to grace throws you off balance. So these were new Christians that were transitioning from the law to grace. They were transitioning from their previous faith and embracing Christianity, which was not an incredibly easy nor an incredibly safe thing to do in the first century. Like it would have been easier for them to just remain Jewish. The persecution would have been far less at that moment than it was for Christians. So this was a time of transition and a time of struggle. We don't know who the writer of Hebrews is, and I know there's a lot of people that have these really long letters after their name because they have degrees in theology. They think they know, but the truth is we don't know because the Bible doesn't say who the writer of Hebrews is. But whoever it is, God inspires them to write to this group of new Christians to help them connect the dots of their old faith. So if you ever struggle with kind of the theology of the Old Testament, you're like, oh, I don't understand this, and what's with the sacrifices and the feasts and all that kind of stuff, read the book of Hebrews. Because the writer of the book of Hebrews helps these Jewish people connect their old faith to their new faith. It says, hey, all those pictures and those shadows and all the things that you saw in the Old Testament, this is what it pointed to. And guess what they all pointed to? Jesus. And so he's trying to help them understand that. He's kind of connecting the dots. And he writes to them to encourage them and to remind them of the anchor that they have in this new season and in this new journey of faith. They're transitioning into something that's difficult, to be quite honest with you. It's new, probably exciting to a certain degree, but challenging and difficult. And so he writes to them to remind them of the anchor that they have in this new season. The writer of Hebrews finishes our passage today with a powerful statement. And he shares with us the kind of anchor that God wants for us, but not only is it an anchor he wants for us, it's an anchor he holds out to us. It's not God just saying, hey, you should pick up one of these days, and kind of leaves us on our own. He says, you need this, and I'm holding it out to you, and I need you to grab a hold of this, because you need this anchor. Well, no, things are good, things are going well. You really need this then. He holds this out to us. So hopefully today we can arrive at this powerful statement together. We're going to pick up in Hebrews chapter 6, and we're going to pick up in verse 16, right? So here we go. It says, now when people take an oath, they call on someone greater than themselves to hold them to it. And without any question, that oath is binding, right? And I think we kind of understand that, right? I can remember, I don't know, it was like elementary, middle school, somebody would, say something, well, I swear on my grandma's grave. Like, that's just weird. Like, why would you even who says that? Or why would you say it? But the idea was that they were kind of expressing that this is really important, and they're trying to validate the importance and the truth of what they were saying. It used to be, if you were being sworn in as a witness in a court case to give testimony, do you remember what used to happen? I don't know if this still happens. I've never been sworn in as a witness. But you used to put your left hand on a what? Bible, yeah, an idea. And then you would raise your right hand, and they would say this, do you solemnly swear, do you solemnly promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I don't even know if they say that anymore. But yeah, they would have you do that. You would make a promise, and you were bound to the fulfillment of that promise based not just on your word, but based on the word and the reputation of someone greater than you. So here's the idea. In the middle of transition, we're always looking for someone greater than ourselves to confirm and affirm what is true and what can be trusted. We're always looking for what's true, what's trusted, what's stable, what can I anchor to? We're always looking for someone greater than ourselves to confirm and affirm what's true and what can be trusted. And in just a moment, the writer of Hebrews begins to use two words, and one that we're really familiar with, that word's promise. We pretty much know what a promise is. And then he uses the word that he's already mentioned, and that's the word oath. So follow with me. Verse 17. God also bound himself with an oath. So here's the idea. Because there is no one greater than God for God to swear by, he swears by himself. He says, I swear on me that this is so. This is how it'll be, right? He says, so God also bound himself with an oath so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. So God made a promise to a certain group of people that he would be their God and they would be his people and that he would be their Savior. That was the promise. The promise is, I will save you. And not only you, I will save all of those who will believe. But then he sealed this promise with an oath. In other words, God gave the details of how this promise would be fulfilled. Right? So the promise was, I will save you. And then he swears an oath and he gives the details of how that promise will be fulfilled. Let me try to explain it a little bit if I can. A promise is a commitment to do something, right? We've all probably made promises. Hopefully we've kept them all. That's probably not true. But we've all made promises. Many years ago, I gave a promise ring to Carrie. And Carrie's like, I'm hoping he says my name, because if not, this gets weird. I gave a promise ring to Carrie, my wife, many years ago. And it's got to be probably at least 30 years or so, because tomorrow we'll be married 24 years, right? So that's pretty amazing. And we dated 7 years before that. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 years ago, I gave Carrie a promise ring. And the promise ring held the idea that she and I would be together, right? I promised her I wasn't going anywhere. And then I moved from California to Alabama, and that's a story for another day. And so, but the promise was, you and I will be together somehow, some way. Then on September 11th, 1993, we stood before God and our families and our friends, and we sealed our promises with an oath. We filled in the details of how this promise to be together will be fulfilled. The promise was, we'll be together. The oath filled in the details of the promise and stated that we'll be together, believe it or not, till death do us part. And so that oath was made within the context and within the covenant of marriage. So the promise was, we're going to be together. The oath was, here's how. We're going to be together as husband and wife till death do us part within the context and within the covenant of marriage. Does that kind of make sense? So the promise is, here's the promise. The oath fills in the details of how that promise is to be fulfilled. God's promise was, I'm going to save you. That was his promise. The oath was, I will send my son Jesus. He says, here's the promise. I'm going to rescue you, and here's how. And the cool thing about this is all of this had already happened. The promise had been fulfilled. The oath had already been fulfilled. And these people that the writer is writing to has believed that. They placed their faith in Jesus. But here's the thing, and I know this is going to come as a shocker to all of you people that are believers, but they were still facing struggles. Like, who told us? Nobody told us that. Nobody told us that. Once I believe in Jesus, they told me, like, life is great and life is fine and I'll never have struggle and I'll never just try to figure out my balance in the middle of transition. Actually, whoever told you that's a liar, okay? And I hope they led you to Jesus, so I'm not like bashing them, but I'm just helping you understand. Jesus never promised that. Matter of fact, he promised quite the opposite. He said, hey, you know what? In this life, you're going to have tribulation. You're going to have struggles. Yes. You're going to go through seasons of change. They're going to knock you for a loop. But I want you to be of good cheer because you got this. So I want you to be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. I've got this, right? So the writer of Hebrews continues. Here's what he says. So God has given both his promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it is, I love this, impossible for God to lie. Isn't that huge? Like, God's character is so impeccable that even if he wanted to lie, he couldn't. Like, that just blows my mind. That even if he wanted to lie, he couldn't do it because of his character. God made a promise, he sealed it with an oath, and he fulfilled it exactly as he said. He promised a rescue and a rescuer, and he delivered on that. And because that's true, something can happen inside of us. Something can happen within us because this is true, because he fulfilled his promise and he delivered on his oath. Because of the promise, because of the oath, because of the fulfillment of it all by a God who loves us, who will not change and cannot lie. Here's what the writer of Hebrews writes. Therefore, based on all of that, based on the fact that God made you this promise, he filled in the details, he delivered on all of it. Based on all of that, we who have fled for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. The King James Version says we can have strong consolation. NIV says that we can be greatly encouraged. Something can happen inside of us because of the truth of what God has done for us. It's awesome to know that even in the midst of change, we can hold to a God that never changes. He doesn't change. Even in the midst of difficult seasons, we still have a Savior. No matter what our situation and circumstances, God tells us that we can have great confidence in him. In him. He fulfills his promises. He never changes. He cannot lie. And now the writer of Hebrews pens one of the most powerful statements I believe we could ever read in regard to transition. And no matter where you find yourself today, I believe this next statement is for you. But I believe it's especially for you if you find yourself in the middle of a challenging season. I believe this is especially for you if you're in the middle of a very difficult transition and it's not one that you wanted and you almost wish would go away. I believe this statement is for all of us, but I believe it's incredibly, especially for each of us that are in the middle of a place that we're like, hey, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm not sure what this is going to look like on the other side of this. I don't know if there is another side of this. And I believe this powerful statement hits us right in the heart. I believe there is great confidence and encouragement to be found in this next statement, and here it is. This hope, the writer says, and this hope The writer's speaking of Jesus and the fulfillment of God's promise to rescue us. He says this hope is a strong and trustworthy what? Anchor for our souls. This hope that we have, that God gave us the promise, made it specific with an oath, and fulfilled it in and through His Son Jesus, this hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. We don't have to drift away. You don't have to drift away in good seasons. We don't have to find our spiritual walk just diminished because things are going well. You don't have to do that. And you don't have to drown in the middle of difficult and challenging and overwhelming seasons. You don't have to drown. That's what He's telling us. We have a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. And I love that the writer of Hebrews says that we have this hope as a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. Because that's what our souls need. We get distracted by what we think we need. But what God says is what your soul needs is a strong and trustworthy anchor. And He says that your soul has been specifically designed for this anchor. There's no other anchor that's strong and trustworthy. No matter what else you're trying to hold on to, it wasn't designed for your soul. That anchor has been. And that's so important for us to understand. Hope is the most powerful anchor we have for our motion-sickened souls. I heard someone once say that if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And I heard that like a long time ago, and I thought, oh, that's nice. And then I've watched friends and family walk through stuff, man, that was like hard. And I've seen some of them lose their hope. And that statement's true. That if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And God is offering us a strong and trustworthy anchor of hope. The writer of Hebrews isn't talking about a lightweight hope. It's not like this anchor. This anchor isn't going to hold much. It's not going to hold anything. He's talking about a significant hope. He is talking about a significant anchor that has weight to it, a hope that is strong and trustworthy. But this begs the question, what are you hoping in? See, in our common day vernacular, this word hope is a lot different than the word hope, the way it's used in the Bible. See, we think of hope as kind of wishful thinking. Well, I hope this gets better. I hope my circumstances change. I hope this season comes to an end and a new season begins. What are you hoping for? Is that what you're holding out hope for? Are you holding out hope that your season will change or your circumstances will change? And I love you guys too much to lie to you. They may not. Or they might. You might go from good to bad or bad to worse. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I'm just saying we don't know what the next set of circumstances may be. We don't know what the next season is going to look like. But if your hope is anchored in the fact that I hope my circumstances get better, I hope my situation changes, I hope my next season is better. If that's where your hope is anchored, I'm going to tell you right now, you may be sorely disappointed and you're currently disillusioned. It doesn't always happen that way. Show of hands, let's just be honest, we're all friends mostly here. I did notice there was some partitioning of teams, but we all, by the grace of God, we get along. So let me just ask you this. How many of you just out of experience, whether you're a believer in Jesus or not, it doesn't even matter right now, okay? It does matter eternally, but right now for this question, that doesn't matter. How many of you have ever been in a season that was really difficult and stepped into a season even more difficult? Anybody been there? We have just about 100% concurrence. That's not a Christian thing. That's a human thing. That's a welcome to the human race. But if I'm holding out hope, well, it's going to get better. My situation will get better. The season will change and those things will be better. The circumstances will be better. If that's your focus, if that's your anchor, you are holding on to a very lightweight anchor. Are you holding out hope that your season or circumstances will change, or is your hope? And the word hope in the Bible didn't mean wishful thinking. It didn't mean I'm sitting at home going, well, I hope No, that word hope in the Bible meant that you had a confident expectation. That's what it means. I have a confident expectation in something that I can hold to that has weight to it. It is significant anchor. Are you holding out hope with the idea that your circumstances or seasons may change, or are you holding on to an unchanging God? That makes a world of difference. There's great confidence, there's great hope to be found in the presence, the protection, and the promises of God. And this hope, found in Jesus, is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. Can I share with you just for a second? And I'm just speaking of me, so everybody's story may be a little different in how they look at us. Let me share with you why I've chosen to place all of my hope in my Creator through faith in His Son, Jesus. One is because of His presence. That He promises that when I accept Jesus as my Savior, I am never alone. Ever. Matter of fact, the writer of Hebrews in chapter 13, he uses this cool verse in verse 5. He says that God said, I will never, no, ever leave you alone. Most assuredly not. In triplicate form, God has signed this document and said, I will never leave you if you're mine. So what I know from that is no matter what seasons may come, what circumstances may hit my life, what difficulties I walk through, I don't have to walk through them alone. Because God has promised His presence with me. And I know what it's like to walk through things and you're like, man, I'm just so alone. If you're a believer, I want you to understand, I know it may not seem like it, you're not alone. Because God cannot lie. And He can't change His mind. I've also determined that by faith in Jesus, I anchor my hope in my Creator because of the protection that He offers. Sometimes what seems like a setback from our perspective is a setup from God's. Sometimes His delay or His detour is because He has something better coming for us, and He loves us too much to let us settle for something less than His best for us. And I know a lot of times we look at it and we're like, well, why isn't that falling into my lap? And why isn't it going this way? Do you realize that oftentimes that's God protecting you for something less than His best? And sometimes we don't think about that. We're like, well, why hasn't it happened for me? And why haven't I gotten healing? And why haven't I? You know what? God may be steering you in a direction that's much better for you than you could ever imagine. Here's the promise that He offers to us. And this is that other reason why I've anchored my hope in my Creator through faith in His Son. For those of us that are in Christ, God has promised us that this is not the end. It's not. And I know it may feel like it. It may look like it. Like, man, this is a setback. This is a step backwards. This is a dead end. I don't understand this detour. Can I share with you something that it's just, if you'll just let this hit your heart, I hope you just hold on to it. Even if this life ends, God says this isn't the end. Amen. It's never the end. It's never the end. If I'm a believer in Jesus, if I have faith in Jesus Christ and God is my Father, there is no end. So whatever it is you're bumping up against and going, man, this is it. This is the end. Even if this life ends, it's not the end. I get to step into eternity, which is far better. And it goes on forever. We can have great confidence in the hope we have in Jesus. Because this hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor. I don't know what you're holding on to. I don't know what you're holding out hope for. But I want to encourage you this morning, man, place your faith, place your confidence, place your hope in Christ. This morning, I've asked the praise band to close us out with a song, and I don't know where you're at. Maybe you're sitting here this morning and you're like, man, I've been feeling hopeless. Maybe this is a morning that I don't know what you need to do or how you need to do it. I'm going to give you the opportunity. If you need to just gather with somebody and pray for a moment, and maybe for the very first time, reach out and take hold of the hope that God offers you. If that needs to happen for you this morning, man, that's awesome. I hope you'll take that step and go, you know what? It feels like I've just been in this hopeless cycle, but I don't know Jesus. And I'm going to take a chance that the hope He's offering me is the hope I need. It's that strong and trustworthy anchor for my soul. Maybe you're a believer, And maybe you've been in a really good season, but you found yourself drifting a little bit. Maybe this is the morning, you know what, I need to tie back to that anchor. I need to make sure that I'm moving in the direction God continues to want me to move in, that I don't take it for granted, and I don't believe it's all on me, that I accomplished this, that I give credit to God and I stay close to Him. Maybe you're here this morning and you are a believer, and that doesn't mean you're immune to storms and difficulties and challenges. I'm convinced that once you step into faith, that the storms and the difficulties and challenges seem to kind of grow. I don't know about anybody else, but that's been my experience. And you know what I think it is? I think it's Satan on the prowl a little bit. He's working on us to try to see if we'll just kind of walk away from everything that's true. And I believe God's up there as a loving Father going, hey, guess what? Watch this. Watch what happens here for my servant. Watch what happens when he hits his knees, and instead of surrendering to you, Satan, he surrenders to me, and I bring him forward from this. Maybe you just need, in the middle of your difficulty, you need to go, you know what? I need to be anchored. I don't know where you're at, but I pray that today you'll find that strong and trustworthy anchor for your soul. I'm not it. Your family's not it. Your finances are not it. Jesus. That's it. All right? So we're going to stand. We're going to sing this song. Listen to the words of the song, and they speak to the truth of what we talked about this morning.